When Bob Skelton took off his boots and socks at Newcastle Showground a fortnight ago for a rain dance and a bush poetry request to the heavens for action, he not only did it for himself but other farmers doing it tough. As showers continued to sweep in from the coast today, he was prepared to accept just a little credit that Huey had finally delivered.
I'd like to take some credit, but I've got to give credit to the people over there that supported me.
Even being close to the coast at Minmay on Newcastle's western outskirts hasn't saved Bob from running short of feed and water. So today's rain gauge check held a sweet surprise.
In my rain gauge there, I came out this morning, I think there's about nearly 50 mil. That's pretty good because we've had nothing. And my creek was bone dry as from last Wednesday.
But across the valley, it's been a case of being under the right cloud to get the benefits. While the Maitland, Cessnock and Gresford areas recorded between 10 and 37 millimetres in the 24 hours to 9am, the Department of Primary Industries says falls have generally been patchy, although it will give farmers reason for hope if there are follow-up falls. Gary Blair, NBN News. The election campaign may not be officially underway, but current Lake Macquarie MP Jeff Hunter is already out on the hustings and keen to scotch any rumours about his political future.
Look, I've got plans to continue to represent Lake Macquarie as long as the Lake Macquarie people want me to represent them.
Speculation his adversary on March 24, Lake Mayor and independent candidate Greg Piper, had been offered the seat by the ALP for the state election in 2011, was rejected out of hand.
I've spoken to the party today and they assure me that absolutely no offers have been made.
While Greg Piper admits he did speak with Labor officials, the proposition didn't fit his political plans.
I would call it a bit of a fishing exercise, what-if scenarios. And certainly there was a what-if scenario. It's not something that interested me, didn't go any further.
That cleared up, both opponents want the Western Lake Macquarie electorate focused on their impending debate about local issues.
And I think that there's just a general disenchantment with the government as it is at the moment.
This is going to be a clean campaign as far as I'm concerned, and I'll be running on the issues.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
A decade ago, the concept of global warming and its environmental effects was barely on the radar, but protests like this one against climate change held in Newcastle Harbour at the weekend have put the issue firmly on the political agenda. Further proof is the findings of a survey of Hunter residents' attitudes to the environment, conducted by the Hunter Valley Research Foundation.
When you get a result where 80% of Hunter residents believe that climate change is going to directly impact on them in the next 20 years, it sort of says, well, the climate change message has gotten through to the community. People are accepting the idea.
And while the state and federal governments debate the best way to reduce the impact of climate change in the future, it seems Hunter residents believe they can help.
There's about 63% of people believe that people can make a change at the personal, local level that will have an impact on slowing climate change down.
With Upper Hunter dams now below 30% capacity, the survey also examined the future household use of recycled water.
We had about 44% of people say yes, they were prepared to drink recycled water, which is an interesting result.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
On a balmy Adelaide afternoon, the Red Army found its voice early. On the park, though, it was Newcastle to make the first tactical move. A free kick to Adelaide gave Newcastle's Tim Brown a real headache. Down the other end, Fernando went painfully close. But he couldn't save this from the evergreen Carl Viert. The masses celebrated like they were already in, but enter Nick Carl and Vaughan Coveney. Newcastle on side and on the board to level things at 1-1. That's how regular time finished, and after a breather, the players were back on. A result almost came through the Jets' Troy Hearfield. Nick Carl then had a go. After 2 hours, it came down to a penalty shootout. Exhausted, Adelaide watched on as the Jets fired 3 past, but not the 4th. Ross Aloisi made it 4 for Adelaide as former Newcastle gloveman Daniel Beltrame finished the game a hero. No hard feelings between rival coaches after a match that doesn't get much closer.
It's fantastic that we got through. We did it the hard way, but we did it.
And they'll have to do without Matthew Kemp. A second yellow card in the final series means he'll miss next Sunday's grand final in Melbourne through suspension. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. If there's a positive out of last night's painful loss to Adelaide, the Jets coach has found it.
You get into situations where you go away from home and play teams and you need a real strong mental resolve, and I think these players are definitely developing that.
Players returned with long faces after a long flight, ruining missed chances and what could have been.
This is definitely one year in my career that I'll look back and say we did have the team to go another step further.
Whether it's the same team next season, though, depends on contract talks. Gary Van Egmond will meet with Jets management on Thursday. He's also had interest from Sydney FC.
They're both options, obviously. You'd be silly to discount anything, but right at this moment, obviously, we're very content in Newcastle.
He's got to do what's best for himself, but I think what's best for himself is staying in Newcastle.
As for the players, they've been given the week off, time to recover from a dour loss with perhaps the best sort of medicine. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. $118 players each paid $100 to enter the tournament, where the professionals really did flop.
If amateurs can end up in the final 12 players, anyone can do it.
And that's the appeal. The Newcastle Poker Championships giving hacks a feel for big-time poker outside the back rooms of pubs.
Win a couple of easy tournaments and then all of a sudden you think you can have a go at the big stuff like this.
So what makes a good card player? Maths has something to do with it. Put simply, though, it's luck, and that's where the charms come into play.
That's the kids. I just took a picture of them and stuck it in the chip protector, or card protector. It's good. Brings luck, I think.
In his case, it did. Cockerell finishing first, earning $5,000 and the tag of inaugural champion. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
With its financial difficulties firmly in the past, Vice-Chancellor Nick Saunders says the University of Newcastle is going into the 2007 academic year hoping to build on the successes of 2006.
We've put our sort of difficulties in terms of our finances well behind us now. We did very well in research and in teaching last year.
9,000 new students today began their orientation into university life, and while for each the expectation of what uni is about is different, most agree that studying is just a small part of the equation.
A lot of fun, a lot more friends, different sort of studying style. I'm used to a small school, so we come from about 45 in our year, and so it's pretty exciting.
Just have a good time, basically. That's another reason everyone's here.
But only 40% of the 9,000 students have come straight from high school. The remaining 60% are mature-age students.
I think the youngest person starting university this year at Newcastle is age 16 and the eldest person is 70.
No one is ever too old for the thirst of knowledge, I guess.
This is the site near Muswellbrook where Centennial Coal wants to develop the open cut to produce over 10 million tonnes of coal annually to fuel the region's power stations and for export. The state's planning department is still assessing the project, but after last year's Land and Environment Court verdict requiring all Anvil Hill's greenhouse gas emissions be assessed, it asked the company to calculate a cost-benefit analysis when the product is eventually used. That cost based on a figure of $109 a tonne for carbon dioxide emissions suggested in a climate change impact report prepared for the British government. Centennial estimates almost 12.5 million tonnes of carbon dioxide would be emitted from the Anvil Hill coal, and based on that British figure, that comes to $1.4 billion a year. The company says the hypothetical figure will have no bearing on the project because the cost is expected to be passed on to electricity consumers. Hunter Business Chamber has today questioned why Centennial was required to prepare the report.
It's certainly out of the norm that you would have to do these analysis or extra analysis to get the mine in production.
The planning department is now being urged to focus on the economic and social benefits electricity generation from Anvil Hill's coal will provide communities. Gary Blair, NBN News.
In 2002, Freedom Air ceased flights between Newcastle and Auckland, the airline citing a lack of passenger demand after just 9 months. Despite that disappointment, Newcastle Airport has today announced an alliance with Norfolk Air.
What we're planning is for Norfolk to come in on a Monday and return on Monday, so it'll be a weekly service to and from Newcastle to Norfolk.
Norfolk Island is a historic holiday spot with spectacular scenery, but compared to New Zealand, it's a small tourist destination, prompting concerns about the long-term viability of a weekly Boeing 737-200 flight. But the airport believes marketing will be the key to success.
The incursion into New Zealand a few years ago was that before internet marketing took hold, and so therefore the presence of that particular flight in the market wasn't as well known.
In other airport news, a military exercise disrupted passenger flights today, with some cancelled or delayed. The RAAF is using 1/3 of the runway, restricting the size of passenger aircraft which can take off.
Newcastle Airport is on a lease from the Department of Defence, and the lease certainly acknowledges that RAAF Williamtown is first and foremost a military airbase.
The exercise will be repeated on Thursday, and passengers should check with their airline. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It's not a matter of if, but when another major flood will strike the Lower Hunter, according to the State Emergency Service. The organisation says while a large area of the region is flood-prone, many residents wouldn't know what to do in the event of one like this in 1955.
A lot of people have since moved into the region who have never ever experienced flooding before.
According to a community survey conducted in 2005, 71% of the region's population are not concerned about the possibility of flooding. Following these results, the SES and Hunter Central Rivers Catchment Authority have now created a flood education strategy.
Well, it gives them a heads up as to what's going to happen, how they can react to the situation when it comes. On the DVD it will show the flooding of 55 and what could happen in today's climate.
Since 1955, millions of dollars have been spent on flood mitigation works in the region, like the crib wall here in Maitland. However, the works won't be able to stop floodwaters, they'll merely act to slow them down. The strategy will be available from Thursday at the Maitland Town Hall. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Nicolas Cage jumps over spinning helicopter blades and rides his flaming hell cycle up tall buildings in his latest movie, Ghost Rider. But the gutsy and talented man actually riding the cycle is Newcastle's Rob Jones. After 8 months working on the film, he's back in his day job driving a truck, just as he was the day he received the call-up from Hollywood.
I just couldn't believe it. I thought it was someone playing a joke, that come and make a big feature movie. It doesn't happen every day.
The two-time Aussie trials riding champion did most of the bike stunts in the film, working closely with the star.
That was unbelievable. Yeah, he's a really nice guy, down to earth, will talk to anyone and will help anyone, so for a big movie star, he's an excellent guy.
Rob's big stunt today was dumping a load of rocks at a building site at Bob's farm. The 32-year-old hopes to work on more films in the future, but until then he'll swap the hell cycle for a Kenworth B double.
Yeah, it is a bit slower and a bit heavier, but it pays the bills as well.
The film opens this weekend. Paul Lobb, NBN News. This is Cole Hatchman performing the solo that earned him the title of the loudest drummer in the world.
Smash it, just smash it and smash it and smash it, because it's a world record that I've got to beat here.
A French drummer held the previous record of 109 decibels, but Cole recently smashed and crashed his way to an eardrum-shattering 137.2 dBs. That's the equivalent of a fighter jet flying close overhead. The former Little Hornet and Screaming Jets band member has the certificate on the wall of his studio, and despite bad damage to his hearing from 24 years on the drums, the 32-year-old is showing no signs of quietening down.
1 gig is worth 1,000 rehearsals, so I've played thousands of gigs. So it all adds up to being very loud.
Cole reckons his neighbours have never complained, but we couldn't find any nearby to ask. Maybe they spend a lot of time out, knowing that when Cole hangs up his sticks, his son Zoe will be ready to rock. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Getting in last-minute quality time with her dog Cooper, Cheryl Salisbury admits this could be her third and last Olympic campaign. After a long reign as captain, Salisbury's experience is still vital to the Matildas' success, as the squad prepares to face the likes of Myanmar, Uzbekistan and Taiwan.
Coming up against lowly ranked teams, it's always something you go in there confident, but you've got to also be aware because there are big upsets that happen in world football.
Compare that caution with the enthusiasm of striker Kate Gill, 10 years her junior.
I'm expecting pretty convincing wins, I guess. I mean, it's smaller Asian teams, so we need to go out there and we need to dominate and we need to score goals.
After failing to qualify for the inaugural Women's Olympic tournament in 1996, our women's team has been slowly working towards a medal in Beijing.
The starting 11's definitely changed in the past year, so all the girls are pushing, and that's part of us wanting to win a medal.
After earning a place in the senior squad in 2005, Lauren Colthorpe is now an established member of the Matilda midfield. The 21-year-old says it's comforting to have a squad filled with Hunter players.
Especially with the captain and vice-captain both being from here, it's good help and yes, people to look up to and train with them every day, so that really helps.
All three girls happy to be swept up in football's resurgence.
With the Jets obviously doing well for us as well. I mean, Newcastle's a soccer town at the moment.
Built in 1844, this once grand building was one of Maitland's first pubs. Since then, it's passed into private ownership and decay. Peter Kell says when he bought the house almost a decade ago, it could have been saved, but lengthy council delays have held up restoration work and made the task now near impossible.
The veranda's falling down around us, and we have 2 engineering reports that have condemned the building.
He's already spent $525,000 on the historic home, which he originally planned to turn into a women's refuge, but says it's now so dilapidated he can no longer afford to carry out the project and wants the building demolished instead. However, following objections by the Heritage Council and residents, it's unlikely Maitland City Council will approve Mr Kell's request at its meeting tonight.
This is far too important a building to say just simply knock it down and it's lost forever.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It may be Valentine's Day, but there was no love from the Lord Mayor today. He says the Minister for Local Government, Kerry Hickey, has made inaccurate comments about council expenditure. The same man who Mr Tate believes tried to mislead the community over his driving record. Mr Hickey was caught speeding on 4 occasions.
This is just blatant misleading and contempt for the community, misrepresenting the costs that have been attributed to me and the council and the councillors. And as a minister, I think he should be well above that. Clearly he's not.
The Lord Mayor says he's actually cut back his staff and says Mr Hickey didn't explain that the $230,000 in expenses was the total since 2004.
I think he's targeting the council to get at me because I'm an independent candidate in competition with his party members in the election.
Meantime, former federal member for Newcastle Alan Morris has announced he'll be publicly campaigning in support of dumped Labor MP Bryce Gaudry.
To be told that Bryce wasn't allowed to be a candidate or have to resign from the ALP to be a candidate, I think is an act of absolute political bastardry, to be honest, and I've never seen anything quite so gross in my 37 years in the Labor Party.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It's a statistic that's got the Police Association more than a little concerned. Areas of the Lower Hunter and Lake Macquarie are patrolled by just 1 police person for every 1,000 residents, well below the state's average of 2.18 police per 1,000 people.
We need to have a significant amount of more police in those areas as a matter of urgency.
Today, the association met with election candidates to convince them of the dire need for more police.
At this stage, the Liberal Party's come out with a commitment for extra police, and it's very welcome. However, it doesn't quite meet our expectations. We're after Labor now to at least match that.
But while most Hunter candidates are yet to make any commitments regarding police issues, today Shadow Police Minister Mike Gallagher promised to turn the Swansea Police Station into a 24-hour operation if a Liberal government is elected in March.
Yeah, I think Swansea could do with a 24-hour police station. Certainly more police needed, I think, in the area.
Yeah, I work up at Beechwood Homes and our office is vandalised quite often, so I think a 24-hour police station would be great. Yeah.
The queue of colliers is this week topped 63. That's 7 more than the previous record set in March 2004. The annual summer wait by international customers is well known to Federal Resources Minister Ian Macfarlane, who toured Port Waratah Coal Services Kooragang loader in late 2005 to better understand the issues causing the delays.
We're watching the situation, but in the end, it is a sharing arrangement in a port which is obviously handling very high demand from our customers from coal.
On how the situation can be resolved, the Minister had this advice for Hunter coal producers.
We'd encourage the companies to continue to discuss ways in which there can be a capacity sharing arrangement operating out of Port Waratah and how that can minimise shipping delays.
Hunter Business Chamber disagrees and believes the best solution is in the hands of the state government by speeding up the Newcastle Coal Infrastructure Group's new Kooragang loader.
That should be promoted, expanded and developed as fast as possible so that we can reduce those coal queues.
And in a backhander to environmentalist calls to curb coal exports, the Chamber says that shouldn't affect government decision-making.
It's an existing demand from existing mines under a contractual basis to satisfy an existing market.
Gary Blair, NBN News. More than 400 swimmers are expected to take part in this Sunday's ocean swim from Spoon Rocks to Caves Beach. And among those swimming the 1.5 kilometre course will be retired wallaby Ben Darwin. He was given some pointers today from the event's 2005 winner Justin Norris. The swim is Darwin's latest challenge since leaving rugby.
Up until November, I really hadn't swum more than 100 metres, so it's a big thing for me. I look like a bit of a dugong in the water, but I'm getting back and forth, and hopefully I can finish it on Sunday morning.
The former Wallaby prop went close to snapping his spinal cord in a shocking accident during the 2003 World Cup. Now recovered, he's keen to raise awareness of spinal injuries.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky not to become a quadriplegic or even killed in my injury in the World Cup, and so it's something I like to support, and you get a constant reminder of how lucky you are.
Justin Norris had a spring in his step today after his wife Brooke gave birth last night to their second child, a baby girl named Ceres. But his advice to Ben was focused on the swim.
I'd say don't worry about the sharks, don't worry about the jelly bubbles. The water's warmed up, all right? It's not too cold, so just stay in a grip and keep your head down, you'll be fine.
Paul Lobb, NBN News. With city beaches closed today because of the rough surf, Hunter Surf Lifesaving took its Sudanese students to the ocean baths. Many of these kids have never seen the ocean, but having moved to Newcastle, which is fringed with beaches, it's important they learn the ropes. For some, just going under was a new experience.
We have to come and learn our skills from the beach, and we like the beach also, and that's what we like about Australia.
Them surviving, staying relaxed, teaching that by being relaxed they're not going to panic, and by not panicking they're going to be safe.
The project is a joint venture between New South Wales and Hunter Surf Lifesaving and Newcastle Council, and these students from Lambton High are among many who'll benefit.
We took them for a walk yesterday along Newcastle Beach over here, and they got a great insight into there. They saw the size of the waves, they saw rips, they saw permanent rips, the whole lot, and we even showed them blue bottles and what happens there.
I didn't know how to swim when I came to Australia. So now I learned how to swim and I'm good at it.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It was the day to declare your love, whether that was a lifelong commitment like this couple, Stephen and Samantha, or with a traditional dozen roses, even 3 dozen if you really want to impress. But what about those who aren't celebrating Cupid's favourite day? Well, your local library could be the place to be tonight, as love is expected to blossom among the books. At this Lake Macquarie Library, instead of speed dating, they'll be hosting read dating,
where we're asking people to bring their favourite book along and a few words about it too. And you'll meet somebody, tell them the book you like, and hopefully meet somebody who has a similar interest in your kind of books.
And according to a new survey, if you're still searching for that special somebody, there's just one thing to do. Find yourself the perfect pooch, preferably one from the RSPCA, and start pounding the pavement or your local park. A survey of more than 200 people shows 4 out of every 5 respondents, dog owners and non-dog owners alike, chatted to people with pooches while taking a stroll. And in many cases, a quick chat has led to much more. In Hong Kong, these dogs have taken the plunge today, walking down the aisle. Now that's got to be more than just puppy love. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
This is the area just west of Merriwa that has been transformed for now from drought-ravaged country into an oasis. It's the result of a severe thunderstorm that deluged the area with between 50 and 125 millimetres of rain in less than an hour.
It blew and it rained, a lot of rain, a little bit of hail.
A dramatic consequence was this flash flood that swept down Kellett Creek about 15 kilometres from Merriwa. The unfolding twist of nature captured on video by local graziers Tony and Joe O'Brien, who were there to witness the head of the flood crossing the causeway of the road leading to their property.
A little slow to get there. Once it's there, it's then all happening. And it's an event that I hadn't witnessed myself before, nor my father, who's been around for over 90 years.
The power of last Saturday's flash flood might be hard for most people to understand, but this section of tree was carried on the raging waters like a matchstick.
Surprisingly today, when Tony and Joe returned to the creek, it bore few scars from what appeared to be a battering. They hope by releasing their footage it will help educate people, especially motorists, about the potential punch that flash floods from thunderstorms can unleash.
To know that that sort of thing can happen when that you need to take care on country roads anywhere that there can be water.
While the storm and flood have left an array of damage and unconfirmed reports of stock losses, there has been a positive upside for this cluster of farmers. In addition to a flush of green pasture, farm dams that had been empty for nearly 6 months are now full thanks to a storm they'll find hard to forget. Gary Blair, NBN News.
This is what Newcastle's former BHP steelworks site might have looked like, a $140 million car import centre handling 240,000 motor vehicles per year. But this isn't Newcastle, it's Port Kembla, with work already underway to build the complex, leaving Newcastle with a huge vacant lot and lamenting what might have been.
There was a lot of jobs because we could have unpacked the cars here, we could have detailed them here, put them straight onto vehicles to the dealerships. So it created a large number of skilled and semi-skilled jobs for local workers.
The Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries today said Newcastle was a preferred site with significant benefits over Port Kembla, leaving those involved in the Newcastle bid seeing red.
They've been overruled by government policy and that's the shame of it all.
The Chamber's Chief Executive Peter Sturrock today said the Newcastle site is 3 times larger and provided greater scope for future growth, while the road system between Newcastle and Sydney was a safer and more suitable alternative to accommodate the large number of trucks. He went on to say that in his view it was a largely political decision, providing a boost to Port Kembla, and he says the government wasn't open to discussions or negotiations for an alternative to Wollongong. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Conservation groups have been trying to save the bushland surrounding Fame Cove on the northern shore of Port Stephens for decades, but some now fear it could be too late. According to locals, these pictures show the destruction of rainforest, the damming of mangroves and a road built over the top of Aboriginal middens. Acting on the claims, the Department of Environment and Conservation has ordered the owner of the 400-hectare block to stop work.
There is a lot of concern that it is impacting on protected species in the area and plant species in particular, and that's what's going to be assessed over the next 40 days.
A representative of the Chinese owner spoke to locals today. She says there are plans to turn the site into a tourist farm with holiday houses, roads and a large boundary fence to contain the 500 goats that will be exported to restaurants in China. The company, which paid nearly $9 million for the land, denies causing any environmental damage, but locals feel there's only one solution.
If there's a possibility that the government could step in and have negotiations with the owner and an outcome would see most of it protected as a national park, then that would be the best possible solution.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It was a historic day for Lake Macquarie City Council, with the plans for the Charlestown Square redevelopment finally making it into the hands of council staff. Included in the development application, artists' impressions of what the square could look like, including extra parking and 140 new specialty shops. The total floor area more than doubling from 43,000 square metres to 90,000.
It's new discount department store, new cinemas, new food court, new supermarkets, and a lot of new specialty shops.
A separate DA was also lodged for the Charlestown Bowling Club. It'll be demolished and rebuilt on Ferris Oval, which is owned by council. That's a point dividing the community.
The council has decided to make its land available, but subject to a successful development application and rezoning occurring.
The council is now seeking public comment. It's expected to be several months before the councillors will make a decision.
The actual exhibition will start on the 26th of February. It will run for 42 days or 6 weeks. The application, people will be able to come and look at the application here at council, at Charlestown Library, and also on our website.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
At 4 o'clock this morning, the Crow family woke to this horrifying scene, their fruit shop and garage ablaze. Their initial efforts and those of the New South Wales Fire Brigade failed to save the building, which is for sale along with the family's house.
After a couple of minutes with the hose, we knew that we weren't going to be able to save it. So basically stood back and watched it burn.
Firefighters were able to save the adjoining building.
They worked for probably an hour to an hour and 30 minutes this morning to put the fire out. They were still here approximately 9 o'clock this morning, just mopping up.
Forensic police today surveyed the scene, trying to determine where and how it began. There are also discrepancies between witness accounts over where the fire started. Apart from the building itself, the family says they've lost thousands of dollars worth of tools, a new ride-on mower and 2-year-old Commodore.
Bit like the shop, pretty gutted. You see these people on TV and you sort of feel sorry for them, but now I know exactly how they feel and it's not all that good.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Pretty close to the extreme limit of our range, so it took a little bit of planning to ensure we had enough fuel to get there and get back.
A friendly kick in the Owens family backyard in Minmai, a world away from the Telstra Dome in Melbourne on Grand Final Day. But that's exactly where Greg Owens Sr. will be with 2 of his sons, hoping to catch more than a glimpse of Greg Jr.
Apparently John Cosmeter doesn't name the side right up until very close to kick-off time, and there's a possibility he might start.
Greg's brother Ty is already being scouted by A-League and English clubs, looking to follow in his brother's footsteps.
Well, I've always dreamed of it, so hopefully soccer can pay off for me too.
With Matthew Kemp suspended because of this tackle on Joel Griffiths, Owens is tipped as a replacement for Sunday's decider. Still on football, and the Jets' Adam Dapuzzo and Ben Kennedy have helped the Socceroo under-23 team to victory over Chinese Taipei. Australia progressed to round 2 in a group with Iran, Saudi Arabia and Jordan. After appearing in the semi-finals, the Jets' Troy Hearfield will link up with the squad for a tournament in Hong Kong next week. Meanwhile, coach Gary Van Egmond will meet with management again tomorrow to discuss a new deal. As for the squad, it's back to training on Tuesday in preparation for the pre-season cup in June. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. She's never won a world title, but Bethany Hamilton is sure to draw plenty of attention when she takes part in the Midori Pro in March.
Just an inspiration in herself, and it's going to be great to see her in Newcastle for the first time.
The 17-year-old Hawaiian lost her arm in a shark attack 4 years ago, but is still determined to make a run at a professional career.
She'll be in the full draw, there's nothing holding back, and she wants to be treated that way as well, so she's just another surfer to everyone.
13 of the world's top female surfers will be at Merewether in March, including former world champion Chelsea Georgeson and current world number 2 Melanie Redmond-Carr. Hot new talent such as WCT newcomer Stephanie Gilmore and pint-sized wildcard Sally Fitzgibbons round out an impressive list.
That's what's happened with this event now. It's gone from the sort of just a regional event to the top level in the world.
The men's draw should be finalised by this weekend, with Mick Fanning already confirmed as the number 1 seed. Still at the beach, and Josh Blair will be on the Sunshine Coast this weekend for rounds 3 and 4 of the Kellogg's Ironman series at Coolum Beach. Blair will be hoping for a better showing at the Queensland Break after illness cruelled his chances during the first and second round events at Newcastle early last month.
It's a miracle she's lived to tell the story. On Wednesday afternoon, 35-year-old Eva Wisniewska took off from Mount Bora and was suddenly caught up in a storm cell, the same front that killed a Chinese paraglider. The world champion was sucked up at lightning speed to 10,000 metres, the height commercial airliners fly at.
I was climbing and it's starting to freezing, my sunglasses and everything. And then it was dark and I could hear some lightnings.
Battered by giant hailstones and rain and a temperature of minus 45 degrees, Eva struggled to control her spinning rig. In the violent weather conditions, she could only pray.
Because of the oxygen, because of the temperature, because of the electricity, because of the lightnings. So it was just, please, clouds, put me out somewhere.
During the ordeal, Eva lost consciousness for 1.5 hours and suffered severe frostbite to her legs, ears and fingers. Unbelievably, she regained consciousness, her paraglider still circling the sky. At 4,000 metres and with her harness full of hail, she began spiralling slowly downward.
No, it's amazing, and still so high and cold, shaking all the time. And then suddenly I went out of the cloud and wow! Maybe I'm safe now.
She landed safely in a paddock north of Barraba, more than 60 kilometres from her original takeoff point, and with only feeling in 9 of her fingers, was able to radio her teammates.
Some pilots got lost, and it's only a few are able to survive something like that.
Eva intends on competing in next week's World Paragliding Championships at Manila. Kate Goscombe, NBN News.
You can tell that Labor Party power brokers are concerned about losing the seat of Newcastle when they lend the weight of a busy senior minister for a meet and greet session in the city. Along with helping to boost her profile, Mr Roosendahl joined Jodie McKay in announcing a 5-point action plan for bus services.
Well, Jodie has that experience of knowing Newcastle, and she's been out there listening to people and talking to people, and that is very valuable information that we can use to improve the bus services in Newcastle.
Ms McKay says transport is her priority, among her plan providing more direct routes to key destinations and a community consultation process.
What they're telling me is they want better services to high visitation areas like the John Hunter Hospital, Newcastle Airport and the university. They want a say in what happens here with Newcastle buses.
The Minister admits there are problems with the current bus system and says he'll work with Ms McKay to improve the situation. Bus services are also a key policy for independent candidate John Tate. He says today's announcement is too little, too late.
The faults and the shortcomings that I've highlighted are being looked at. The pity of it is that they should have been looked at some years ago.
Commissioned by Council, the Newcastle report found that an extra $764 million is needed over the next 20 years to maintain the deteriorating infrastructure. The results were presented by Professor Percy Allen today, and thankfully for ratepayers, the recommendations don't just include raising council rates.
In our report, we've said this problem is really too big to simply fund it by rate increases or expenditure cuts. The council will have to borrow a lot more to fix this problem.
Percy Allen also wants council to investigate other possible income streams and savings. He's suggesting more efficient use of public assets, particularly by selling or leasing vacant, dilapidated buildings, such as the S&W Miller building and the Civic Arcade, and also by increasing rents.
Council clearly has a lot of spare assets in the city and elsewhere which could be redeveloped either by council or in conjunction with the private sector, where they could earn more rent.
Mr Allen says it's an efficient, lean council, but there is scope to improve. So far, they've trimmed just $1.5 million from the budget. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
When men who've had prostate cancer get together, the topic of conversation invariably switches from fishing and footy to PSA scores. That's the prostate significant antigen test, and a low number means lower risk. Former Newcastle Police Commander Ron Bender is a survivor.
Tested and my PSA was a little over the normal level. Not much, but a little.
Further tests revealed the worst, and Ron is now getting on with life after having his prostate removed. He was on hand at the launch today of a book written by a nursing professor and the wife of cancer survivor John Tingle, who researched the views of women on the subject.
And so they said, if I had known more, I would have made sure he was tested. If I had known more, I would have done something, but I didn't know. And what that actually meant was that their husbands were diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer rather than early prostate cancer, which is actually treatable and curable.
The book is available from the Prostate Cancer Foundation.
While the Maitland show was fairly empty today with amusement park rides all but deserted, organisers say it won't stay that way.
It's going to be very big. We expect quite a large crowd. One of the reasons for that being that, like Newcastle not having a show.
The next generation of farmers today paraded their prize steers. Despite the drought, beef cattle numbers are up by 25% this year. The same can't be said for the show's agricultural display.
Unfortunately, with our area, we've lost the agricultural side of it up here because of the urban sprawl, and we just don't get the exhibits that we would like.
But what little produce there is clearly impressed. As did this year's showgirl, 19-year-old Kate Tickle. The glamorous sixth-generation farmer from Dungog plans to use her title to inspire others.
It's an excellent opportunity that's going to allow me to pursue my passion, which is being able to encourage other young people and helping them see what opportunities are there for them as well.
From showgirls to show ponies, all manner of creatures are on display, including 240 puffed-up pigeons. The show wraps up on Sunday. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
They're the largest motorcycle club in Australia, and each year the more than 600 Rebels members must attend the national ride. This year's event, held in New South Wales, took in stops in Sydney, the Central Coast and the Hunter. National President and Rebels founder Alex Vella says despite their fearsome reputation, they're genuine blokes.
Well, mate, we are all gentlemen, business people, working hard people, family people. We're here just to spend some time and spend some money.
And spend they did. Club members hired about 60 rooms at Newcastle's Crown Plaza, and there wasn't even room in the garage for the hotel manager's car.
I normally can get a park in my own garage, but this morning there's probably 70-odd Harleys down there, probably the best part of $1.3 million worth of very pampered motorcycles.
Today, after filling their tanks, they grabbed a meal on the run at Harry's Cafe de Wheels, while the more refined Rebels chose to sit at a harbourside cafe. But most of the action centred on the brewery, where the hotel car park became an impromptu bike show of shining chrome and perfect paint jobs. A mini economic boost for the city, according to Tourism New South Wales Chairman Maurice Newman.
Well, it's bringing 600 tourists who previously wouldn't have been here, so you got to say it's a good thing.
At high noon today, it was time to ride, and after a few words with local police, the procession of pounding machines stopped both traffic and people as it rumbled out of the city bound for Sydney. The ladies on an outing from the Red Hat Society were all revved up, but none more so than the Rebels leader.
It's hard to put it in words, I'm telling you now. It's hard to put in words. Some people like fishing, some like football, and we like motorcycle riding, and it's the best thing that God invented.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Middle distance runner David Bradney really does have the world at his feet, and tomorrow night the world's best will be chasing. At the A-Series in Sydney, he'll be pacemaker in the 3,000 metre event, a role that requires plenty of heart.
He's a front runner, so he's prepared to lay it on the line and go out and run a really hard pace early, and a lot of athletes don't have the courage to do that.
It's at the request of Athletics Australia to have Bradney take part after impressing at the recent national under-20 titles in Hobart.
They could have asked any athlete in Australia to do the job that David's been asked to do, however they've asked him.
Pacemaker's there to make sure the pace is set up so that by the end of the race the runners get the times that they're looking for.
It was a push from the camp of middle distance champion Craig Mottram to make absolutely sure that quick times are the order of the night.
They're looking for 62-second laps, so 3:06 to the 1200, so that's the time they've requested.
And it suits the 17-year-old with 1,500 metres, his pet distance. Bradney will sit the HSC this year. As for 2008, his focus remains the World Junior Championships.
They get their name from their razor-sharp shells. Unfortunately, for some unknown reason, the number of razorfish in Lake Macquarie has exploded over the past 3 years.
It's speculated that the water quality improvement has been beneficial to their growth, but also people have suggested that perhaps the commercial fishing, when it was in operation, might have disturbed the razorfish in their growth cycle.
Lake Macquarie City Council is now working on a management plan to control and reduce the population. This summer alone, several people have suffered serious injuries after stepping on the mollusk.
The injuries are generally quite substantial. Somebody stands on a razorfish, they are extremely sharp and it will cut right through the bone.
In many countries, razorfish are considered to be a great delicacy and are said to taste a lot like Tasmanian scallops. So maybe one solution to the lake's problem is we simply pull them out, cook them up and eat them. Of course, if you find the thought of devouring a giant mollusk less than appetising, you could always follow many Lake Macquarie residents' lead and simply throw them away. Madeline Bond, NBN News. Come September, this sparse stretch of land in Fletcher will be covered in 700 new homes. Newcastle City Council approved the subdivision known as the Sanctuary yesterday and says it will help resolve the region's housing shortage.
There's a pent-up demand for increased housing opportunity and there is a high pressure on rents at the moment. Rents are increasing. This will help that situation.
But John Tate fears the development, which is estimated to bring 2,000 more residents into the area, could have detrimental impacts on the region's infrastructure.
Public transport is very poor in that area. The road system needs a lot of work on it to provide for the additional traffic that's going to be there.
The project is a joint venture between Urban Pacific and Landcom. Construction will begin next month with homes due for completion in September.
There was no faulting the Merewether break last year and Surfest officials can only hope it's that good this time around. But its appeal has presented headaches when it comes to the draw, with a staggering 270 entries received for the men's competition.
It's just an impossibility, but we're open for any sort of options that can be presented to us by Surfing Australia.
For now, entries into the 4-star round of the World Qualifying Series will be limited, with Merewether's Travis Lynch and Reece Smith unlikely to surf, seated outside the top 240. Starting the Open a day early is an option being considered to get through the field, which means pushing the whole carnival back.
There's going to be some long days with the Pro Junior event, which is an international event in itself. And so we just have to weigh up everything and see what we can do there. But again, the main focus will be on the Maitland Toyota Open.
The seeding list was finalised last night with Mick Fanning #1 chasing Surfest title #4. Defending champion Neko Padarats is back as well. Of the locals, Merewether wildcard Matt Hoy will enter in the round of 96, considered among the hunters' better chances, along with Nick Coughlin and Michael Spencer.